Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I am your host, Joanna. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the show. Today, we're diving into a topic that often feels farther away than you would think: designing your ideal retirement. Now, you might be wondering, what does retirement have to do with personal productivity? Well, the answer is everything. Retirement isn't just the end of your working years, it's the beginning of a new chapter filled with opportunities to align your time, energy, and passions with what truly matters to you. But here's the catch: if you don't design it intentionally, you risk drifting into retirement that might feel unproductive, uninspired, or even overwhelming. So, in this episode, we're consulting author and artist Carrie Jane Knowles to learn more about what it takes to design your ideal retirement. In addition to her main endeavors as an author and artist, Carrie also writes a column for Psychology Today, shedding light on the importance of intentionality during life's moments. So, welcome to the show, Carrie. It's great to have you here.
It's wonderful to be there. Thank you so much for asking me to join you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Before we dive into this topic, though, do tell us a bit about your background and what compelled you to pursue your profession as an author and artist.
Well, honestly, it's not complicated, but it started a long time ago. While I was in college, my parents didn't have a lot of money to send me to college, so I wound up working. And I actually started one of my very first jobs while I was in college was working for a local radio station, writing commercials for them. And then I went from there to write for an outdoor sports magazine. And I literally paid for my college education by being a writer professionally. And I wound up getting the degree in English with a minor in psychology. I'm not a psychologist, which I really like to explain to people because I have written this column for Psychology Today for the last 6 years. Um, and one thing which plays into this podcast, one of the questions I know that you asked me, Marie, before we got to here was how has my profession as a writer uh, changed my view of being retired? And being a writer and an artist are all about looking at the world. And that's what I'm trained to do. And that's really what I enjoy doing. And it's something that you just don't turn on and turn off. And as my husband, who for the last 10 years kept telling people, I think she's going to retire. I really think she's going to retire. And then finally, about a year ago, he started saying, people who write and people who make art, they look at the world as writers and artists, and they will always look at the world as writers and artists. And so how can she retire? So he sort of reconciled himself to the fact that I probably won't retire. So it's fun for me to do this podcast with you because I do think about retirement. A lot of my friends have retired and my husband retired. And I've written a lot about, just preparing for retirement, even though I myself have not been good at doing that. And I continue to write, which is fun because I continue to like thinking about the world that I see. And I enjoy that. It's a pleasure for me.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like there is a type of person who, after retirement, especially if you're in, the realm of artistry, you never truly retire because, people often place their efforts and energy into hobbies after retiring. But for this certain type of people, the work is the hobby. So how can you truly retire? But that's a great preface for our topic for today, and we'll go further into detail about this later on. But before we do that, let's get to know you a bit better. So this is Have You Met Carrie? And my first question for you is, what is your favorite book?
Well, I have two very favorite books. One is by John Steinbeck, the American writer. And he has a very small book that not very many people read called The Log of the Sea of Cortez, which is literally a log that is kept on a sea journey with one of his best friends. And it's a book really about what friendship is all about. And I find it's one of those books that I pick up every couple of years or so and read once again. The other thing is that this journey that he takes with his best friend Ed Ricketts, um, the things that he sees, the experiences that he has, actually became short stories. His collection of short stories came from that log, and so it's really fun to see where those stories came from. It's a nonfiction book. Another favorite is The Once and Future King, and by E.B. White, and I just there's it is again a book that I've read a dozen times in my life because it makes me think about the world around me, and also what is possible and what is magic and what is both sort of spiritual magic in a way, in the ways that somebody lives and thinks about the world. So those are two of my favorite books.
And what movies have you enjoyed recently?
Oh, one of my favorites that just recently came out, of course, except for Wicked, which was just too wonderful. And now we have to wait for the sequel, but that's okay. We can wait. Is Conclave, which was just an extraordinary film. By the way, after I saw the movie Conclave, I read the book. And they literally took the book and just ran it through a machine and turned it into a movie. And every word in the movie is in the book. So it was kind of fun to see. I've never seen an adaptation that was so completely off the page, which was, as a writer, that was very fun to see.
Yeah, that's really impressive. It's very rare to see a movie adaptation really truly reflect the original material.
Oh, word by word, you know?
Yeah, love that. And what about podcasts? Are there any that you're listening to at
Oh
the
my.
moment?
Oh no, just the one I'm doing right now. I love to read, and I like books, and I, when I'm not with a book, reading, getting information, I'm up doing things. I'm one of those people who doesn't have the bandwidth to sit and listen to podcasts, and I'm sorry to say that. But I've done a
That is
lot
so
of them.
fair.
I've done dozens of them, and I've never listened to my own podcast. So there you go.
Yeah, look, that is so fair. As a podcast host myself, I find it difficult to just sit down and
Right.
just listen to the podcast. I have to be doing something else, but the activity also has to be not too detracting from what I'm listening to, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So that's totally understandable and very fair. But in terms of role models or people that you look up to, is there anyone in particular in your life, or whether it's work or personal life, that you admire?
I thought about this question a lot when you sent it to me. Um, you've run out of the free districts. Okay. I'm just reading something on my thing, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we'll start this again. Ask me the question again and we'll run this by. Something just came up. Do I need to exit this? Hold on. Let me just get rid of this. Okay. All right. Please ask me again. Something came up on my
Sure.
computer.
And as for role models, has there been anyone that you've looked up to either in your professional or personal life?
I think given the time that I have lived through many things, Vietnam, all kinds of changes in the world, and I've traveled a lot. And I think that at a certain point, I don't think I would, I think the word feminist is sort of I don't know. I'd like to think instead of feminist, I'd like to think of a modern woman instead. And I have 3 women who I admire and read a lot about and think about frequently. One is Eleanor of Aquitaine. The other one is Eleanor Roosevelt, and the third is Mary Cassatt. And
Yeah.
those are
And
3 very, very strong women who led extraordinary lives.
yeah. And what about them in particular have you admired?
That they didn't necessarily follow what the world wanted them to be. They became who they wanted to be. And I think that that's such an important message for women because we are so concerned with trying to fit in. And I love that these women could have cared less. And
Yeah, I
that's
love that
nice.
too. And last but not least, has there been a course or a class that you've taken that has stuck with you to this date?
Mm, a lot of them, but I find myself as over, I would say over the last 20 years, I've become more and more interested in history. And so I guess I would have to say that I'm on my own history course by myself, finding books, historical books that sort of fill in the gaps of my knowledge of what has happened before. I've become more aware that we need to understand what's happened in history so we can have a better sense of where we are today. So I would have to say it's a self-taught course that I find the most interesting right now.
Oh, I love that so much. And is there like a particular niche about history that you're looking up or just generally history around the world?
Um, well, I became very interested in World War II, and not only, from an American point of view, but from sort of all cultural point of views. And part of that was triggered by my husband's family, my uh, my in-laws were both German Jews, and one was born in Neckarsteine in Germany, and the other in Munich. And my father-in-law was arrested during Kristallnacht and put into Dachau for 6 weeks. But because he had filed papers to come to the United States, his paperwork came through. And the Germans, being Germans, said, "Oh, you have paperwork that's come through," and they released him. And my mother-in-law, who they had not met in Germany, they met in the United States. There was a woman, Henrietta Zold, who was part of the Zionist movement, and she literally went through Germany and Poland and collected young people who were willing to be part of the Zionist movement in Israel. And so, those 2 stories are stories that I have thought about a lot in the last 40 years, and I became very interested in just what happened in World War II and, what what is there to learn about that? And so I've read tons of books and also World War One. Where worlds collide and come together and then fall apart and then go apart from each other and make new worlds on their own, I guess is what is fascinating to me. And that sort of coming together and imploding and going apart, which is, I think, something that's happened all through history.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. Well, thank you very much for sharing all of that with us. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you a little bit better. But now let's move on to the interview. And for starters, what's your definition of personal productivity?
It's personal. And what may be let's say you're a newlywed person and you didn't learn to cook before you got married. um, Being able to put a meal on the table, a well-designed, well-cooked meal that's not burned or underdone or terrible, onto the table after a month of trying to do that would be a personal triumph. You would feel very productive, and over time, you would learn to do it very well, and you would take some satisfaction in it. And then once you mastered that, you might move on to something else. So I think personal productivity, I hope, changes over time as you change over time and your needs and your role changes because our roles do change. Your role today as a podcaster will probably change 5 years from now or even 3 years from now. Um, I don't know if you have children or are married or whatever, and your role changes as you move along. And and every time you move somewhere or gain some other status in your life, what you then consider personal productivity does change, you know?
Yeah,
Does
that's
that make
really well
sense? Yeah.
said. Oh, 100%. And I think it also signifies a level of growth if your definition of productivity changes.
Sure.
So yeah, 100%. But secondarily, how would you define retirement preparation?
That is a great question. So let me go back to a story about my husband retiring. My husband was a university professor, and actually, for a time, he was at QUT in Brisbane, Queensland University of Technology. And he was professor for many years, and he loved it. He was very good at it, and he loved it. Towards the end, he was ready to retire, and but that's what he did. He didn't have any hobbies. He didn't have anything that he thought about beyond being a professor. And when he got ready to retire, I said to him, you have to have a program. You have to know what you're going to do because I don't want you to just sit in that chair and read books for the rest of your life. You need to do something else. And we talked about it a lot because he had never thought about his own retirement in those terms. I think, like a lot of people, you think, oh, I get to quit working, retirement. And and that's not it. Yes, the answer is yes, you do get to quit working, but, when you go back to the first question you asked me about, my own retirement, if you're a freelance writer or an artist, you work on your own, you work for many people over a course of a lifetime. There's no HR department. Nobody's going to give me a fancy watch or even a party, when I retire because there's no HR department. And there's nobody who's going to say, oh, here's your retirement package. I am my retirement package. There is no retirement package for me. But my husband had a retirement package, as most people do. And when that happens, they see work ending and then what is beyond the veil? What is beyond the door when you open that door? Is it the woman or the tiger? And so I think that it's too late to prepare for retirement when you turn your paperwork in, that you really should know a year, 2 years ahead of that time. Think about, well, where do you want to be? I find that women have more trouble than men. Women somehow never got the message that it's okay to want something different than what they have. And that is a little bit of what retirement is what do you want that's different than what you've done before? And this is a question that people have a lot of difficulty answering. And as I tell people, sometimes, like if you're going to write a story or whatever, and if you're going to think about retirement, you sometimes need to go away into like a little dark closet by yourself and just think about what is it that you really want and begin to make preparations for that. Do you want to travel? Well, okay, find out, do you have the money to travel? Where do you want to travel? Do you want to travel alone? Do you want to travel with your partner? Do you want to travel with a group? Do you want to travel, put a backpack on and trek? Or do you want to go on, a tour somewhere? So there's a lot of questions that have to be answered. My husband decided that he wanted to he wanted to play the violin. He had played the violin as a child. And then during his professional life, he just didn't have time to play the violin. And so, about a year before he took his retirement, he started taking violin lessons again. And he's kept that up for the last 11 years that he's been retired. And he practices every day and he loves it. And it's like he has made a little, he's a man of routines. He's a person of routines. And that's really, I'm not. I am, but not like he is. I write all the time. But if you're a person of routines, know that about yourself and figure out what your routines are going to be. The other thing is some people see going to that door of retirement, opening that door and thinking, I want to make a difference in the world. I want to do this. And I can tell you about 3 friends who, I want to make a difference in the world. I want to do this. And the 3 of them, all different people who don't know each other, then begin volunteering and being on boards of directors and this and that, whatever. And they found themselves saying, is this really what I want to do? Do I want my day filled with board meetings? Do I want my day filled with volunteering? Do I want my day filled with this? And after about 3 to 6 months of being retired, and setting these goals to be on boards or to, do something to save the world or whatever it was, they found that that really wasn't what they wanted. And but other people have discovered it is what they want. And so I think you need to start thinking about maybe daydreaming while you're still working about what would be fun for me to do? What would be, how could, what is the part of me that has not been allowed to come out? Um,
Yeah.
what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm still working on that. I can talk about my retirement soon, but
Yeah. And how would you describe the relationship between personal productivity and preparing for retirement?
hmm, well, I think you need to decide what how you want to be productive. Um, some people think, "Oh, I want to be with my grandchildren." I love being with my grandchildren. And some people think, "Oh, my wonderful grandchildren." And then they spend all of a sudden they're 70 years old and they're spending time with their 3-year-old grandson or granddaughter and they're going, "Oh my gosh, this is a lot of work. This is not what I want to do." And it's not that they don't love their grandparents, it's their grandchildren. It's like, wow, I didn't expect this. I thought it would be like we'd go out for ice cream or go to a park and it would be easy. Um, and I guess you also have to decide what's your comfort zone. What are you comfortable doing? And I think that's part of the productivity as well is, are you comfortable doing this? Or do you like being stretched? Do you like finding yourself in an uncomfortable position and getting yourself out of it? There's so many factors.
Yeah. And why do you think that so many people kind of struggle to define what they truly want out of retirement?
Because nobody's ever asked them, what do you really want to do? When you have a job, somebody says, this is your job, Marie. You're going to do this podcast and you're not going to say, oh, I don't really want to talk about retirement. They say, no, no, this is what you're going to do today. And then you think, okay, fine. I'm going to talk to this old lady about retirement and it's going to be boring, but I'll get it done. And then I'll move to the next thing. So, you have a job where somebody tells you what to do, and that's great. You get direction, and then all of a sudden you are the director, and you've never been the director before. So, how do you manage that? And you have to learn to be the director.
Yeah. And circling back to what you mentioned previously, where, for example, your husband kind of viewed retirement as like just quitting work, right? Basically. And similar that's pretty similar to a lot of other people how they view retirement as well, viewing it as an endpoint of their working life. But how would you challenge that notion of it being just like quitting a job?
Um, well, some people don't quit their jobs. Some people like me don't quit their jobs. My job is to see the world as a writer or see the world as an artist. I don't know why somebody gave me that job, but I feel that that's my job, and I feel I'm good at that job. So why shouldn't I do it? And besides that, I don't know how to tap dance, and I don't know other things how to do. Um, and I don't necessarily want to do them. I like doing what I'm doing. So I think that you know, I have a dear friend who I think is a great extreme to talk about. And he was in the financial world, and he was very good at what he did. And he quit being cold turkey, and what he really wanted to do was play video games. And he has a huge setup now, and he plays video games all day long in his home. He has his own little office, and so his once financial office in his home is now his video game office, and he plays video games. And it drove his wife nuts initially. She was like, "You know what? He's gonna go up into his little man cave every day and play video games." And my response initially was, "Well, maybe he'll get tired of that and he'll do something else." Well, that was 4 years ago. He's not tired of it. He loves it. And so that's okay. I mean, that's the other thing is whatever makes you happy in retirement, it doesn't have to have a productivity bell on it that says, "Oh, you win. You did it really well." You just have to be happy at it. It has to be something that makes you feel yourself.
Yeah, and look, the video games 24/7, that does actually sound really exciting. Plus,
Does
a
it?
lot of yeah, a
That
lot of
sounds
video
crazy
games
to
these
me.
days are so complex that they might as well be full-time jobs. So I'm actually impressed with the commitment, if I'm being
He
honest.
loves it. I mean, he's
Yeah,
very happy, so you know, do it.
yeah, you can't argue with that.
No. And his wife likes to travel, so she travels, and occasionally he'll go and meet her at some foreign country, and then he comes back and plays video games. Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So, aside from what we just talked about, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about retirement that hold people back from making the most out of it?
I think many people are afraid of it, like, what would it mean? How would you fill your day if you if you didn't have a routine, if you didn't have something you had to do? Could you make your own schedule? And if you're a person of routines, which many, many people are, routines are wonderful because they help center you. They give make a rational kind of uh construct for your day. You get up, you shower, you read the paper, you have breakfast, you go to work, you meet your colleagues, and the colleagues become your friends. COVID was so destructive for everyone because they weren't going to offices. They weren't having a community outside of a family. And so many times that community at work really was like a family, and they were friends, and those were tight relationships. And that's the other thing that's difficult about retiring is that you leave that community. You actually divorce that community. And it's hard to maintain that community once you leave it, unless you have a lot of friends who have also retired at the same time, and then you maintain that community outside of work. But when you think about it, if you've worked in a job for 15 years, your colleagues are your community. And leaving them, retiring is a little like a divorce. And people
Is
don't
Carrie
expect
freezing on
that.
your
And all
end,
of a sudden, they
Aiden?
feel like a big chunk has been taken away from them. It's not just the work, it's that commitment to friendships. And those friendships are based on working together. And sometimes
Yeah.
those friendships go with you, and sometimes they stay at the door.
Yeah. I think another huge misconception that I I personally have had this, and I know my friends have had this misconception as well. That I used to believe that retirement, or like I used to perceive retirement as um, more about how you can finance it, and most of what I thought about retirement was that. So, what are your thoughts on that? How does designing your retirement go beyond just money?
That's interesting because many people see, and we had talked earlier before the show about, what is it like right now with the stock market all over the world tanking. It's like, wow. And people who may this week have thought about retiring, let's say June 1st, that's a common day for, at the end of a quarter, if you're in sort of an industrial kind of thing, or uh, an industry that, retirements often occur at the end of a quarter or something like that. Or if you're a college professor at the end of a semester. And so all of a sudden, imagine if you are retirement age and you had been planning and you had this nest egg of your retirement, your 501(c)(3) or no, your 401(k). I don't know what it is, and I don't remember what it is in Australia, but here it's a 401(k) and a retirement package. And you have this retirement package, and most retirement packages are connected to the stock market, as is your 401(k). And all of a sudden, you are waking up, and it's April 8th, and for the fourth consecutive day, the stock market has dropped precipitously, and I had a teeny tiny rebound this afternoon that got squashed by 6 o'clock. Um, eh, you know, that could be very anxiety making because your plans included that pile of money, and all of a sudden that pile of money is melting. And so much of the time when people talk about retirement, they're only thinking about the money. They're not thinking about what you might do. And I'm not sure that that answered your question, but we do get it's easier to be preoccupied about, do I have enough money? And my goodness, there's enough advertisements in every magazine that you pick up, every newspaper you pick up, every podcast or everything you listen to, which is how much money will you need? Can you live if you have $1 million? How long can you live if you have $1 million? Well, most people can't even imagine having $1 million. So when they see these ads, how long can you live on $1 million after your retirement? Somebody who doesn't have that must read that advertisement and think, well, how long can I live on nothing, on Social Security or whatever the social structure is in Australia or any place else in the world. And to see, and that's important because you do need money to live, but the money part is just a very small part of having a successful, and I think rather than the word productivity, I would like to think in terms of a successful retirement versus a non-successful retirement. A retirement that helps you grow to be somebody, you've wanted to be, or to just be happy with being who you are. Um, and I think that's a better measure than productivity is.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. But aside from the financial struggles and anxiety surrounding that, what are some of the other challenges that people tend to face during retirement?
Health, a lot of people um, manage to stay healthy because they're active at work. And then all of a sudden they're not being as active and their health declines. And that's pretty well documented that, you have to in order to be healthy and to enjoy your retirement, you have to have a certain amount of physical health. And I think people often get surprised by, the difference between what being 65 years old is like and being 70 years old, because it seems like, well, these are the same. Well, they're not the same. Many things happen between 65 and 70, and a lot happens between 70 and 75, and 75 and 80. Those 5-year increments can be not so much fun. Um, so, I think that when young people think about retiring, they may not consider, will I be physically able to trek around the world if that's what I want to be? People who have been happily married for a long time, think, oh, and then we will travel and it'll be wonderful. And all of a sudden, one of the partners is physically not capable of that. And how do you manage your relationship? Um, and you can be 75 and healthy, and you can be 75 and not healthy. And that's a consideration most people don't take into account. And um, to know it may not be as simple, and to stay healthy, I guess, active.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, 5 year difference is huge. I'm 26 now and I suddenly don't feel the same as I did when I was 21, to
Yeah.
put it that way.
No, and and there's very good in that, to be, I think at 26 you probably feel more settled than you did at 21. You're
Oh,
through
yeah,
school.
definitely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I remember when our oldest son was, first off on his own, and he's a professional musician. He lives in Europe, and he had gotten it, he's a very fine classical musician, and that's what he does. He's never waited table or anything like that. And he gets enough money, he buys a little flat, and then he has to go and uh, get a dishwasher and a washing machine and a dryer and a refrigerator. And he called up and he said, my God, he said, this being an adult is just too much work. And it was like he'd never thought about what it would take. So, not just the money, but you have to go, you have to go to a store and you have to pick out a refrigerator that you're going to live with for 20 years. So you have to make a good choice. And is this washing machine going to be big enough to wash my clothes? And, it's like there were so many adulting questions that had to be answered about, do I really want a dishwasher? Can I live without a dishwasher? And so buying an appliance became the first time that which I thought was really funny, was the first time that he was confronted with, I am an adult and now I have to make adult decisions, all by myself. And I thought that was a funny way to look at the world, but I think it's very true. Your first home, the first time you live in an apartment by yourself. Um, I didn't marry until I was in my 30s, and I had a big professional life before, and I traveled a lot with work and whatever. And I got used to being a woman on my own, traveling by myself. And when I lived by myself in my 20s, um, in my late 20s, and I was freelancing. I love to you know, do research. I love research. I do research and this and that. And then I'd take a break during the day and go do something, go to a museum, whatever, and then have dinner. And then I would start writing at 10 o'clock at night. And I would write until 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was great. It was a perfect schedule for me. It fit my biorhythms. I was a happy camper. And then I got married and I realized, well, you can't start writing at 10 o'clock at night because you have a partner who wants to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and you can't write until 3 o'clock in the morning if you have children. So I had to be somebody else. And, uh, things change and you have to be able to change with them.
Yeah. And what about social connection during retirement? We were speaking earlier about how, when you're working full time, that the people that you work with end up being almost like a family in some sense, and retiring means breaking up from that, and by extension, most of your social connections. So,
Right.
um, what would you say is the importance of social connection in retirement?
Oh, if you don't have some connection to people outside of yourself, I think you are not only lonely, but you become isolated and, not connected to the world, less alive, you
Yeah.
know?
So, what are some ways that you would recommend seeking that social connection that might help to
Well, y
fulfill you a bit better?
in your new life as, a, I guess you would say, a self-actualized retired person, you find you spend some time and you build a new set of friends, a new set of colleagues. You find people who are enjoy the same things that you enjoy, and I think you have to be um, maybe more outgoing than you would want to be. You know, if you have a job, you don't have to be outgoing. You just have to go to your job, and you'll meet people. You know, you don't have to do anything about it. You know, because there will be people there at the office usually, and they'll be asking you questions or wanting to work with you, or you'll be in a meeting with them. So you get to know people. So you have to, I think, put yourself out there in the world and be willing to do that.
Yeah, I remember during my grandfather's retirement, he was struggling a lot with the social connection aspect of it because he was at that point in his life where he just enjoyed staying at home a lot more. And at some point, this was really affecting his mental health. He just didn't really know how to convey that. And so we would have to encourage him to engage in community events at like the community center, for example. So w- with people who are managing, the challenge of finding connection outside of work once you're retired, what's your best advice for that?
Um, Take a deep breath and go out there and find somebody. You know, I think that it's very important to me, I should say, and it's very personal. To me, it's very important that I know people of all different ages and who are just interesting. And for me to be interested in them as well as them, you know, I think you have to give as much as you get back to build a community. And I think building a community is scary for everybody, you know, who it's like, oh, you know, am I going to like this person? Are they going to be a friend, or um, you know, or and a lot of people think, "Oh, okay, that's too much. I can't deal with that." Especially, I find that yeah, do you know what I mean? I bet your
Yeah.
grandfather said that. It's like, no, you know, and all these merry widows are like, "Ooh, I would like to go out with him," or you know, and people can feel quite uncomfortable by the social things, feeling as though there might be expectations that they can't meet, or they don't want to meet, and there, you know, I'm happy working in my office, but I'm also happy with friends. You don't have to have a zillion people, but you have to have. I really believe, especially in the world we have today, that to put yourself on a good psychological basis, to just feel like I'm safe. There's somebody I can call on. I don't have to be by myself. I think people who lose spouses or, you know, good friends, um, you know, often feel like I'll never find that again. And so therefore I won't find it. So I won't look for it and I'll be by myself and that will be better. And I don't think it is for most people. For some people it might be.
Yeah,
Interestingly
it's
enough, I have a few very close friends and but I'm not an extrovert in some ways. I don't sort of like want to be the middle of anything, and which is very much I'm a looker, I'm somebody who observes and then I write about it or I think about it or I draw about it or I paint about it. And I don't have to be in the spotlight. In fact, the spotlight makes me uncomfortable. The fact that I do these Zooms, I think is quite amazing, actually. It's kind of like, well, it's just you and I, so it's really okay. Um, but some people find the aspect, it's good, it's easy for me to go out and to talk to people sort of on a one-to-one basis. But some people find that like, whoa, that's too much. People are going to ask me personal questions. I can't answer them. I don't want people to know my business. Um, so I think that that's very complicated.
Yeah.
I think that retirement is really truly like, the story of the tiger or the lady. It's like what happens when you open that retirement door? Are you going to find happiness? Are you going to be eaten alive by it? You're going to find sadness in it or aloneness in it.
Or maybe
And
it's
so,
all.
yeah, yeah, exactly. The other thing is just some people retirement makes them feel, "Oh, I'm old," "I'm old." And so old often translates to not useful, and I think that's very sad. I'm 75, by the way. So, and I think it's great. I think it's great to be 75.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it should really be viewed more as like I have done a lot of work in my life and now is the time to really put myself first and
right.
pursue all the other things I want to pursue outside of working, just working. Well, like, unless working is your passion, in which case by all means continue working if you're able to. But overall, what would you say are the most important aspects of designing an ideal retirement?
Finding something new about the world and putting yourself into that new place. Um, I have been writing professionally, both fiction and nonfiction, since I was 18 years old. And when around 70, I discovered that I love theater. I adore theater. And I started writing plays, and I absolutely love writing plays. And it's a whole different genre than anything else I have ever done. And it's a more complex one in so many ways. And it's not a solitary kind of writing because you have actors to deal with who will say to you, well, I don't like the way that line is. And so you have to rewrite a line. So it's all of a sudden work that I've always done by myself. And occasionally an editor would say, well, I don't like this, go do this another way. That was fine. That was a conversation. And then I went off by myself. And there's not so much by myself when you're working in the theater. And it is such a lovely challenge to be doing something different like that, taking skills that I had all my life. And I can imagine, let's say I had been an engineer and I had made, I don't know, bridges. And so I knew a lot about weight bearing structures and this and that and whatever. I would love to think that in my retirement, I would take all that knowledge and I would turn it into something else, but still drag that knowledge with me and let it be bigger than it was before. And I think to me, that would be a great retirement. A very dear friend of mine who I just talked to this afternoon, she was, you have that one person that you grew up with that you never lose contact with. And Sue is that person for me. And she became a middle school guidance counselor in a very remote town in the thumb of Michigan. Michigan is a state that looks like a mitten. Well, she lives in the mitten. She lives in the thumb. And she became middle school guidance counselor in this small school in this rural area. And as the guidance counselor, she helped organize the seventh and the eighth grade and the ninth grade field trips, the big yearly field trips. And when she retired, she discovered that's what she loved most about her job. And she became a tour guide. And now she's one of the top tour guides of Rhodes Scholars. And she's taken this small little corner of a job that she had as a guidance counselor for all those years. And now she is like a big time tour guide on this wonderful company. And she loves it, and she does these historical tour guide things all over the country. And, you know, it's like we were laughing this afternoon. I said, "This is what you were born to do. You're the born tour guide." And I see what Sue has done as one of the absolute most successful retirements I have ever seen, because she took something, a little something that she got to do in her job, and she turned it into another life. And I think that definitely would be, if somebody were to say, "Who's the best retired person you know?" I would say Sue is the best retired person I know.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you about this. And now I think it's a great time to talk about some of the daily habits that you recommend practicing. What would you recommend practicing when it comes to designing an ideal retirement, especially leading up to it?
I think that you need to, establish your own rhythm for the day. And I think the we we all have a, like, go back to COVID again. We all lost our balance a little bit with COVID in terms of um, working from home in our pajamas, which, by the way, I would never do because it's a mindset for me. Somebody said to me the other day, I like to swim in the morning. I go to a water exercise class no matter where I'm living. And I was getting dressed, and most women come to, these morning water workouts, and they just kind of slump on some clothes and walk out. Well, I get dressed, and I've been a freelance writer since 1968. And I've never worked in my pajamas. It's like I would never consider, because I'm going to work, and I've always dressed up to go to work. And so many people lost that sense of who are you at work. And I think that you um isn't it funny? Clothes really do make the person in a lot of ways. And so anyway, I was getting dressed in the locker room, and this woman came up. She said, "Why do you look so put together?" And I said, "Well, because that's the only way I can go out in the world." And she said, and everybody else was in sweatpants, and I'm like putting on lipstick, or, combing my hair and putting some jewelry on, and in the pool. And they're like, "Wow, that's weird." And I said, "No, it's not weird. Now I'm going to go back to my home and I'm going to work. Um, and I think that you have to, I hear particularly women say, "Oh, once I quit my job, once I retired, I don't wear those clothes anymore." And I think, well, what of those clothes made you feel the best? I could imagine getting rid of things that you didn't feel good in, but keep the things you feel good in and build on those. Um, and dress for your day, and don't slump around the house by yourself. Get out. As I say to my husband, I have to go and air myself out at least once a day, or I'm not civil. And I just need to, even if it means walking around the block, or sometimes I'll go and work in a coffee shop, because I just want to, even though I have an office at home, this is my nice office at home. I have a nice office at home. Um, I will go and work in a noisy coffee shop just to be around the energy of the world, um, which I think keeps you alive, you know?
Yeah,
Get out.
yeah. I think there's a little bit of generational difference there between you and me because I find myself the most comfortable and the most, what people would say, locked in, just the most focused in my own home office. But I do like that idea, which, I mean, like, I've done it before. I do like the occasional going to a coffee shop to do your work. I feel like it helps you kind of sync with the heartbeat of the city you're in, or whatever location you're in. And it might not directly translate to your work at all, but it just helps you be a little bit more in touch with things that are around you. So I
Yes.
really, really like that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's very true, and we lost that because we were afraid of being with other people, and
Yeah.
now we're a little bit afraid of being with other people again. But I think that, and I also think that it's easy to get old being retired, and you know, I don't think that's very much fun. I think that if you, it's more fun not to be old. It's okay to get older, but not to be old, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And how do you think that the practice of, going outside to a coffee shop to do your work, or getting dressed up for work, how do you think that practice helps to contribute to designing an ideal retirement?
Well, it makes you try to be your best self and put the best you out there. Um, our daughter is a nurse, and she is very accomplished and has several specialties. And we were talking one day, and she got her hair done, and we were talking about something, and she said she wanted to buy some little earrings because she wanted to, you know, wear them to work. She couldn't wear something that was large and dangly. She just wanted to wear something that was pretty. And she said to me, she said she realized that many of the other nurses that she worked with, they just kind of, they put on their, you know, scrubs and didn't bother with her hair because they were just wearing green scrubs all day. And she realized that part of her job was helping to make patients feel good about themselves. And if she didn't look good, if she didn't come into the room looking a little bit polished, then it's kind of hard to look sort of like your best self in a pair of green medical scrubs. Um, and so she said, I just would never go to work anymore without my hair being up and a pair of earrings in, and to look just a little bit nicer so that my patients feel, good.
Yeah, you look good, you feel good. So I think that, yeah, that's a very valid point. Well, thank you for sharing all of that with us today. It's been such a pleasure to pick your brain about this. Now let's move on to the open mic segment, and that's where you'll get the chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be related to the topic, but if you want it to be, then that's fine too. So the floor is yours, Carrie. Please take it away.
Okay, so now the irony of me being on this show today, which for the fun of it is I got on this show because of a column that I write, and I struggled with the column I wrote the column for 6 years. I loved it. I used to refer to it as that was sort of the twisted Pollyanna in me, and who wrote this upbeat column. And then because of many things that were going on in the world, I thought, ooh, she got run over by a bus. She's gone. I don't want to do this anymore. And I just recently stepped away from my column to make room in my life to do something I wanted to do. And I realized, and that was kind of like my semi retirement, that what I wanted to do was write plays and to be involved in theater. And I'm working with some really exciting young directors. And one of my plays won a very big contest recently, the William Faulkner literary competition. And that has been all very exciting because I'm often the oldest person in the room. And what fun to work with these young actors and young directors and to think about the world in a different way. And I found I loved writing my column, but I outgrew my column and I needed to be somebody different. So
Yeah. Congratulations
thank
for
you. That
that. It
was a
sounds
hard
like,
thing to do, by the
yeah.
way. They were like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm done. I'm done."
Yeah,
Um,
it does sound really hard. I mean, like I've heard stories about people, young struggling theater people wanting to work in the theater, and it's really hard to break into that industry. So the fact that you did it at your age is a testament to, just you can do you can do whatever you want if you put your heart to it.
I
If you
think
put your
so.
mind to it, and you
I mean, I think that that's
focus on that.
not necessarily true, and you have to be able to say, "I'm gonna put my heart into it, and I'm gonna love doing it, whether I'm successful or not." And, we have such a I think having lived in Australia, which was so much fun, I coming back to the States after we lived in Australia, I realized that, in the States, we have this, you have to be a success. You have to be the best. You have to be, it's like, and I loved in Australia the tall poppy thing, to not be the tall poppy and to learn to be happy and to enjoy what you're doing. And that in itself is a much bigger reward than any kind of award that you might receive or be seen in your field as the best. If you're the
Yeah,
very best in your field, then find another field,
yeah,
so you
yeah.
can stretch your
And
wings in a different way.
yeah, and it's really all about doing what you're passionate about. Like starting out with making a horrible play is probably more progress than not making one at all. You get to learn from what you want to do better, from what you think might be a horrible play that you did. So
Yeah. And that what you just said about doing something the first time to make a horrible play, actually like writing a book, or writing a collection of short stories or writing an article. I think that the best way to approach it is not, "Oh my gosh, this has to be perfect while I'm doing it," because it never is. You should just make actually the worst short story you can make, the worst book you can make, and then have an opportunity to make it into a better one. And I'm one of those nerdy people who like editing and enjoy getting something out and then fixing it and seeing it shine in the way that I hear it in my head or whatever, um,
yeah.
and to give it a go.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today.
Sure.
I really enjoyed my time speaking with you. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
The best thing is to go to my website. And the other brave, outrageously thing I've done today, every day do something a little scary, right? I I deleted all of my Facebook pages and I no longer am on Facebook. So, I just kind of said, done. Let me move on into a different world.
Yeah. Do you feel liberated now? What's the emotion there?
Well, first of all, let me tell you how complicated that is. It's like there's no little switch. There's this whole thing that you have to do to get out of it. And it took me, I actually called, for many years, I had a wonderful office assistant that I could call on. And I now live in Washington, D.C. Actually, I live in two places, but my wonderful office assistant from years back, she's in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I was for 40 years. And I texted Rachel today and I said, help. And she said, I'm in meetings. I'll call you later. And I thought, I could do this. I could do this. I could do this. I could do this. And so I took a couple hours today and I said, I am going to do this. And, followed the instructions, of course, which I failed, and followed the instructions, another set of instructions, and I failed. And it's far more complex than it looks, but you can do it. And I just felt that it's become a world of bots and AI, and I didn't need to be participating in it. The other thing that happened, which I think is kind of crazy, I don't know how, is my Facebook page, every other thing was a new crochet stitch. And I'm like, what is this? It's like every day there's a new crochet thing. You can crochet a bunny. You can do this. You could, and I'm like, no, I don't need to learn to do this. So I decided, basically for political reasons, to get off of Facebook. That I also discovered that one of my novels got got stolen by Chat GPT to be used in its teaching thing. You can go on this website and as a writer, you could find out what has been co-opted. And I realized some of my stuff had been co-opted. And then I found out that they also co-opt things off of the Facebook. And I thought, I really don't need that. So I got off. Took me half of a day, but I got off,
Yeah. Good on you for figuring that out. Well, we'll leave your website in our show notes so that our listeners can have a look and stay tuned to all of your upcoming work. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope that you learned a little bit more about how to design your ideal retirement, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you for having me.
You have been listening to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website pp.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Joanna. Thanks for tuning in.